The Blacksmith's Son. Constantinople, April 1204. The world was ending in fire and gold. From his hiding place in the bell tower of a half-ruined church, Leo watched it happen. The air, thick with the stink of smoke and spilled wine, carried the sounds of a city being torn apart. The triumphant Latin war cries, the splintering of doors, the screams of the vanquished, and beneath it all, the low, hungry roar of the flames. 3 days. For 3 days, the armies of the Fourth Crusade had been sacking the greatest city in Christendom. They had not come to liberate Jerusalem as they vowed. They had come for plunder. Leo's knuckles were white on the sun-warmed stone of the tower ledge. His father, Nikos, the best blacksmith in the Blashenai district, was down there somewhere. He had sent Leo to the church for safety, his face grim and smudged with soot, a heavy warhammer in his hand that he had forged himself. "Stay until I come for you," he had ordered, "no matter what you hear." But Leo had heard everything. The clash of steel that had grown closer, then suddenly, terrifyingly silent. A fresh wave of shouting erupted from the street below. Leo flinched back from the ledge, peering down. A group of crusader knights, their surcoats stained dark, were dragging a heavy chest from a wealthy home across the square. They pried it open with a sword, and even from this height Leo saw the glint of silver. Their laughter was coarse and loud. But then, a strange quiet fell over them. They straightened up, their hands moving to the pommels of their swords. They were looking at a man who had stepped into the far end of the square. He was tall, wearing the simple, travel-stained robes of a monk, his hood pulled up against the settling dust. He carried no weapon. He simply stood there, a still point in the chaotic storm of the sacking. One of the knights, a brutish man with a broken nose, barked a challenge in Latin. The monk did not respond. He began to walk forward, his pace steady, deliberate. The knights laughed, but it was a nervous sound. 2 of them drew their broadswords and advanced. What happened next? Leo's mind struggled to process. The first knight swung his blade in a murderous arc meant to cleave the monk in 2. The monk didn't dodge. He moved inside the swing, his hand flashing up to meet the knight's wrist. There was a sound like a dry branch snapping. The knight screamed, his sword clattering to the cobblestones. The monk shoved him, and the massive armored man flew backward, as if launched from a trebuchet, crashing into his companions and sending them sprawling. The other knights stared, their laughter dead. The monk pushed his hood back. Leo gasped. The man's face was severe, handsome, but it was his eyes that stole Leo's breath. They were a luminous, piercing gold, and they held a light that seemed to come from within. It was a look of ancient, terrible judgment. The monk spoke, his voice calm, yet carrying perfectly to Leo's perch. "You were given a sacred duty. You have defiled it. You have spilled innocent blood in a city of God. The balance is broken." The broken-nosed knight, now enraged and fearful, scrambled to his feet. "Sorcerer!" he spat, crossing himself. He raised his sword. "In the name of Christ, be gone!" A sad, cold smile touched the monk's lips. "He is not why I am here." The knight charged. The monk didn't wait. He moved, and his movement was not human. It was a blur of motion, a streak of gray and gold. His hand closed on the knight's face, and a light, pure and blindingly white, erupted from between his fingers. The knight convulsed, a choked gurgle escaping his lips. When the monk released him, the knight collapsed, his eyes wide and empty, a look of frozen terror etched on his face. There was no mark on him. The other knights stared in horror. The monk turned his golden gaze upon them. "Tell your masters. Tell the thrones and dominions who hide behind their mortal pawns. The compact is shattered, the war is begun anew." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked away, disappearing into a smoke-filled alley as silently as he had arrived. Leo sat frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the power. He had seen an angel of death. He was sure of it. Shaking, he crawled back to the other side of the tower, looking toward his home. The street was empty now, save for a few scattered bodies, and one more. Near the smithy's doorway, a large man lay fallen, the familiar warhammer still clutched in his hand. Nikos. A sob caught in Leo's throat. He had to go down. He had to. A shadow fell over him. Leo whirled. A woman stood in the doorway of the bell tower. She was beautiful, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a flicker of amber fire. She wore fine clothes, now torn and dusty, but she carried herself like a queen. "You saw," she said. Her voice was like honey and smoke. Terrified, Leo could only nod. She stepped closer, and he saw that her beauty was a mask for something immense and predatory. The seraph was careless. His pride always was his weakness. She knelt before him. Her smile was gentle, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Do not be afraid. Child, you have been given a gift. You have seen the truth of the world. There are no angels, no devils, only power, and those who would seek to control you with fear." She gestured toward the square where the monk had been. "They call us devils. They say we tempt humanity, but we only offer choice, freedom. They are the ones who demand obedience, who punish doubt." Her gaze drifted toward where his father lay. "They are the ones who bring the sword." Tears streamed down Leo's face. The woman reached out and wiped one away with a cool finger. Her touch sent a strange, calming chill through him. "The war is old, little one. Older than this city. Older than the god those fools downstairs pray to. It is fought in shadows for the hearts of men, and now you are a part of it." She leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Remember this day. Remember the cost of their justice, and when the time comes, choose your side wisely." She stood and walked to the ledge, looking out over the burning city. "The world will forget this day. It will be written as a tragedy of men. But we will remember. We always remember." She turned back to him, and for a split second her form seemed to waver, and Leo saw something else, a magnificent, terrifying creature of shadow and flame, with vast, leathery wings and eyes of molten brass. Then it was gone, and the beautiful woman was back. "Survive, Leo," she said. Then she stepped onto the ledge and was gone, not falling, but melting into the shadows of the descending twilight. Alone, Leo huddled in the tower as night fell, the city's agony continuing below. The words of the golden-eyed monk and the shadow woman echoed in his mind, a terrifying contradiction. The war is begun anew. Choose your side wisely. He was just a blacksmith's son. He didn't understand the war of angels and devils. He only understood loss. And as the fires of Constantinople illuminated the ancient, hateful faces of both sides, a seed was planted in his heart. Not of faith or of fear, but of a desperate, quiet hope that one day someone might be strong enough to tell them both to go to hell. Chapter 1. The Wrong Place. Present day, San Francisco. The problem with being a history grad student, Leo Valerian decided, was that you spent so much time thinking about the past, you often missed the present bar tab. "I'm telling you, it's a solid theory," Leo said, gesturing with his pint of IPA. "The economic instability of the Weimar Republic directly mirrors the pre-fall conditions of the Western Roman Empire. You could see it coming a mile away." Across the scarred wooden table, his friend Miles Chen snorted. "You could see it coming because you have a time machine called a history book. Nobody in 1928 was reading Edward Gibbon for funsies while waiting for their strudel." Miles, a software engineer, found Leo's entire career path to be a charming but ultimately impractical hobby. "They should have been," Leo insisted, a familiar passion lighting up his features. "That's the whole point. We never learn. We just keep making the same mistakes, painting them in different colors, and calling it progress." Maya Tallis, sitting beside Miles, smiled into her gin and tonic. "And this is why you're still single, Leo. Hey, baby, ever think about how our romantic evening is just a prelude to societal collapse?" Leo laughed, a warm, easy sound. "It's a great filter. Finds me the intellectually curious ones." He ran a hand through his dark, already messy hair. At 26, Leo had the kind of earnest, intelligent good looks that seemed designed for libraries and coffee shops, not dive bars. He was named for his mother's grandfather, a man who had, according to family lore, survived the Great Fire of Smyrna. Leo felt he'd inherited the man's luck, which mostly manifested as narrowly avoiding being hit by buses. "Well, my intellectual curiosity is currently curious about another round," Miles said, standing up. "Same poison?" They nodded, and Miles weaved his way toward the crowded bar. The Hanged Man was their usual haunt, a dimly lit, unpretentious pub that smelled of stale beer and fried food. It was the kind of place where you could debate the fall of empires without anyone batting an eye. "Seriously, though," Maya said, her smile softening, "I like listening to you. You see patterns in everything." "It's a blessing and a curse," Leo said. mostly a curse when you're trying to enjoy a movie without deconstructing its historical allegories. His phone buzzed on the table, a notification from a campus security app he'd forgotten he had. Motion alert. After hours access. History Department Archives. Wing B. Leo frowned. Wing B was the old wing, mostly disused storage for artifacts waiting to be cataloged. Professor Evans, his advisor, was a stickler for procedure. He wouldn't be there this late, and he'd never go without notifying campus security first. "Everything okay?" Maya asked, noticing his expression. "Probably a glitch," Leo muttered, but a nagging feeling, the same one that made him double-check the stove before leaving his apartment, took hold. "The archive sensor in the old wing just went off. Evans would have my head if something got damaged and I ignored it. It's on my way home. I should just pop in and check." Maya rolled her eyes fondly. Ever the responsible one. "Fine, but tell Miles to get me my drink to go. I'm not finishing it without you two nerds to mock." 20 minutes later, Leo was swiping his keycard at the side entrance of the Brooks History Building. The grand old structure was silent and cavernous at night, the usual daytime echoes of footsteps and chatter replaced by an oppressive quiet. The fluorescent lights in the hallway were off, leaving only the dim emergency exit signs to guide him. He pushed through the heavy double doors into Wing B. The air here was different, colder, smelling of dust and slow decay. Rows of metal shelves stretched into the darkness, crammed with cardboard boxes, artifacts wrapped in tissue paper, and forgotten portraits of grim-looking deans. Everything seemed still. Probably just a rat, he thought, feeling silly, or a faulty sensor. He should just turn around, go home, and text Evans in the morning. Then he heard it. A low, rhythmic chanting. It was coming from the far end of the aisle, near the medieval collection. His heart began to beat a little faster. It wasn't English. The language was guttural, ancient, full of hard consonants and sibilant hisses that grated on the ear. It felt wrong. Crouching low, Leo moved down the aisle, using the shelves for cover. The chanting grew louder, more intense. Peering around a stack of crates marked Ostraca, 5th C BCE, he froze. 3 figures stood in a cleared space between the shelves. They wore the dark uniforms of campus security. But they weren't acting like security. They stood in a triangle formation, their faces eerily blank. In the center of their formation on the floor, they had drawn a complex symbol in what looked like black ash. It was a circle intersected by jagged, angular lines that hurt to look at for too long. And in the center of the symbol, hovering a foot above the ground, was a shard of obsidian the size of a fist. It pulsed with a deep violet light in time with their chanting. Leo's mind raced. Campus cult? Performance art? But the air was crackling with a static energy that raised the hairs on his arms. This felt real. Dangerously real. One of the guards, a man named Rob, whom Leo had joked with just yesterday about the 49ers' chances, raised his hands. His voice rose to a crescendo. The violet light from the obsidian flared, and for a split second, Leo saw something else. Behind Rob, a vast, shadowy form seemed to flicker into existence. A monstrous silhouette of horns and bat-like wings, its eyes burning with the same violet light. Leo stumbled back, his shoulder knocking against a precariously stacked box. It teetered and fell with a crash that echoed like a gunshot in the silent archive. The chanting stopped. The violet light winked out. The obsidian shard clattered to the floor. 6 eyes, now just the normal, shocked eyes of 3 campus guards, snapped toward the sound. "Who's there?" Rob's voice called out, but it was different. It was layered, deeper than it should be, carrying an authority that was utterly alien to the friendly guard. Panic seized Leo. He turned and ran, his footsteps pounding on the linoleum floor. "Stop him!" A voice roared from behind him. It didn't sound human. Leo burst through the double doors and into the main hallway, sprinting for the exit. He dared a glance back. The 3 guards were giving chase, but their movement was all wrong. They didn't run with the clumsy urgency of caught intruders. They moved with a terrifying, coordinated grace, their speed unnatural. He hit the push bar of the exit door and spilled out into the cool night air, gasping. He didn't stop. He ran across the quad, his heart hammering against his ribs. The image of that shadowy, horned figure burned into his mind. He didn't see the car until it was almost on him. Headlights, blindingly bright, filled his vision. He threw up his arms, bracing for the impact. Tires screeched on the asphalt. The smell of burned rubber filled the air. The car, a sleek black sedan, stopped mere inches from him. The passenger window slid down silently. A woman was behind the wheel. She had sharp, elegant features and eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Get in," she said. Her voice was calm, commanding, leaving no room for argument. "What? No, Leo stammered, looking back toward the history building. The 3 guards were emerging from the exit, their faces grim. "Leo Valerian," the woman said, and the fact that she knew his name was somehow more terrifying than the chasing guards. "If you want to live to finish your dissertation, get in the car! Now!" A garbage can toppled over behind the guards, knocked down by an unseen force. They didn't even flinch. They just started walking toward him, their strides long and purposeful. Making a split-second decision that defied all common sense, Leo yanked open the passenger door and threw himself into the car. Before the door was even closed, the woman hit the accelerator. The sedan peeled away from the curb with a throaty roar, throwing Leo back against the leather seat. He watched in the side mirror as the 3 figures receded into the darkness, standing perfectly still in the middle of the empty street, watching them go. He turned to the woman, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Who are you? What the hell was that back there?" She kept her eyes on the road, her hands perfectly steady on the wheel. "My name is Cassandra," she said. "And what you saw back there was the reason you're going to disappear tonight. They can't know what you saw. And neither can the others." "The others? Who are they?" Leo demanded, his fear now morphing into anger and confusion. Cassandra finally glanced at him, and for a moment, her eyes seemed to flash with a golden light, just like the monk from his childhood nightmare, a nightmare he suddenly remembered with terrifying clarity. "The security guards," she said, her voice cold. "You can call them devils, and the others are the ones who will want to kill you just for having been near them. You can call them angels." She looked back at the road, her expression grim. "Welcome to the war, Leo. It's been waiting for you." Chapter 2. The Safe House. The city lights of San Francisco blurred into streaks of gold and white as Cassandra drove with a calm, terrifying precision. She wove through traffic on the 101 as if the other cars were standing still, her movements economical and flawless. Leo clutched the door handle, his knuckles white, his mind a riot of confusion and fear. "Devils? Angels," he finally managed, the words sounding absurd as they left his mouth. "What are you talking about?" "Those were campus security. I know one of them. Rob. He likes the 49ers and bad coffee." He was babbling, clinging to the normalcy of that idea like a life raft. Cassandra didn't look at him. The thing that was wearing Rob likes the sound of breaking bones and the taste of despair. The coffee part might be true, though. They have surprisingly pedestrian tastes. Wearing him? A cold dread seeped into Leo's stomach. "You mean possessed?" "A crude term, but serviceable for now," she said, cutting across 3 lanes to take the off-ramp for Potrero Hill. "They are infernals. Demons, if you prefer. They hide in human flesh, like hermit crabs in shells. Most of them are low-level foot soldiers, malice and hunger wrapped in a skin suit. The ones you saw were performing a ritual. A beacon. A beacon for what? For more of them. That shard of obsidian is a focus. It weakens the barrier between here and there, just a little, just for a moment. Makes it easier for another one to claw its way through and find a suitable shell." Her voice was devoid of emotion, a clinical recitation of horrifying facts. Leo fell silent, staring out the window. They were in a quiet residential neighborhood now, rows of Victorians standing like silent sentinels. He wanted to dismiss it all as insanity, a stress-induced hallucination from too much studying. But he couldn't. He had seen the shadow. He had felt the wrongness in the air, and he remembered the stories his yaya would tell him when he was little, stories of exotica, demons and spirits that she insisted were real. He'd always thought they were just stories. "And you?" he asked quietly, not looking at her. "What are you? You said the others are angels. You're not one of them. Your eyes, they flashed gold, like—" He trailed off, the memory of the monk in Constantinople surfacing again, vivid and bright. "Like one of them?" she finished for him. A hint of a bitter smile touched her lips. "No, I am not celestial. My kind, we are called the Nephilim, the offspring of angels and human women. We are the proof of their broken rules, their hypocrisy. We walk the line between both worlds, trusted by neither. Nephilim, Leo repeated the word. It was from the Bible. The giants of old, the mighty men of renown. She didn't look like a giant. She looked like a strikingly beautiful woman who could bench press a car. So you're a half-angel? A term we find reductive, but yes, we maintain the compact. The what? The agreement that ended the last open war. Neither side interacts directly with humanity. They work through proxies, through influence, through whispered temptations and divine inspirations. What you saw tonight was a direct violation. An act of open warfare. If the celestial host finds out, they will respond in kind. And if that happens, this city becomes a battlefield. Millions will die. She pulled the car into the garage of a modest gray Victorian. The door slid shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. So why save me? Leo asked as they got out of the car. The garage was clean, smelling of concrete and oil. Why not just let them kill me? Wouldn't that have covered it up? Cassandra led him to a door leading into the house. Because you saw the ritual. You saw the focus. That makes you a witness. And a witness can be useful. Or you can be a liability if the other side gets to you first. She opened the door. Welcome to the safest place in the city. For now. The inside of the house was a stark contrast to its quaint exterior. It was a technophile's bunker. Banks of monitors showed feeds from what looked like every traffic and security camera in the city. Servers hummed quietly in a corner. Weapons, both modern firearms and ancient, cruel-looking blades, were mounted on a rack on the wall. A large table was covered in maps, old books, and strange geometric artifacts that made Leo's head ache to look at. A man was sitting at the table, meticulously cleaning a disassembled pistol. He was huge, with a broad chest and arms thick with corded muscle. He had a shaved head and a beard trimmed close to his jawline. He looked up as they entered, his eyes a cool, assessing gray, flicking from Cassandra to Leo. "This the kid?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. He didn't sound impressed. "Leo Valerian, meet Kale," Cassandra said, tossing her keys into a bowl on a counter. Kale is also Nephilim. He doesn't talk much. He mostly scowls and breaks things. Kale grunted, returning his attention to his pistol. "He's scared. I can smell it." "He's a history student who just saw 3 security guards summon a shadow demon in his university archives," Cassandra said dryly. He'd be an idiot not to be scared. Leo's phone buzzed in his pocket. He jumped at the sound. It was Maya. "Maya, dude, where'd you go?" "Miles is offended you abandoned his pint. Everything okay?" His heart ached. Normalcy. It was right there in his hand. He could text back, make an excuse, go home, and try to forget any of this ever happened. Cassandra was watching him, her golden eyes seeming to read his thoughts. "You can't." "I didn't say anything," Leo said defensively. "You were thinking about texting your friend, telling her you're fine, going back to your life," she said, walking over to the bank of monitors. She typed a few commands. One of the screens zoomed in on a familiar street, the Hanged Man pub. Maya and Miles were outside, Maya laughing as she tried to hail a cab. Miles was swaying slightly, pointing at something down the street. Leo's blood ran cold. "How are you? Are you watching my friends?" "We're watching everyone," Kale said without looking up. "It's how we stay alive." "Now watch," Cassandra said, her voice tight. Another feed from a different camera angle showed a black SUV with tinted windows pulling to a stop across the street from the pub. The doors opened. 2 men and a woman got out. They wore dark, tactical-looking clothing, but their faces were pale and severe, their movements synchronized and fluid. They didn't look like police or any kind of official unit. They looked like predators. They started walking toward Miles and Maya. "No," Leo whispered, his hand tightening on his phone. "Celestials," Cassandra said grimly. "They must have detected the infernal energy from the ritual. They're sweeping the area for contamination, and your friends were the last people you were with." On the screen, one of the men approached Miles. He said something. Miles, ever friendly, even when drunk, smiled and started talking, gesturing vaguely in the direction of the university. "They're going to touch him," Kale said, his voice a low growl. He had stopped cleaning his gun and was watching the screen intently. "A Celestial's touch can scour a mind clean. They'll rip the memory of you from his head, and probably half his personality along with it. They call it purification. We call it brain damage. The Celestial reached a hand toward Miles's temple. His fingers began to glow with a soft white light. "Stop them!" Leo yelled, surging toward the monitor as if he could intervene. "Please!" Cassandra was already moving. She grabbed a strange wireless headset from the table and spoke into it, her voice crisp and clear. "Gabriel, now! The Hanged Man! Civilian extraction! Nonviolent dissuasion! Go!" On the screen, a motorcycle. A sleek black Ducati roared into the frame, skidding to a halt between the Celestials and his friends. The rider, clad in black leather and a full-face helmet, dismounted in one smooth motion. He was tall and moved with a lethal grace that mirrored the Celestial's own. He said something to the lead Celestial. The man's hand dropped, the light extinguishing. The Celestials' faces, previously blank, now showed cold anger. A silent standoff ensued. The biker, Gabriel, simply stood his ground, a hand resting casually on the handle of a long knife sheathed at his hip. After a tense moment, the lead Celestial gave a curt nod. The three figures turned and walked back to their SUV without a word. They drove off. The biker looked at Miles and Maya, who were staring in bewildered shock. He gave them a casual, two-fingered salute, got back on his motorcycle, and sped away. Miles and Maya stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer, looking confused but unharmed, before a cab finally pulled over and they got in. Leo sank into a chair, his legs suddenly weak. He felt nauseous. "They were going to erase my friends? They were going to damage them to get to you," Cassandra corrected, her expression grim. "To find out what you knew." The Celestials believe the ends always justify the means. Their concept of good is absolute, and absolutely terrifying. She walked over and knelt in front of him, her golden eyes holding his. "Your old life is over, Leo Valerian. You are a witness in a secret war. Both sides now know who you are. One side wants to kill you to keep their secret. The other wants to dissect your mind to find out what you know, and they won't care about the wreckage they leave behind." She placed a hand on his knee. It was warm, and a strange, calming energy seemed to flow from it, steadying his racing heart. "The only reason you're still breathing," she said softly, "is because you're with us. So I'll ask you again. Do you want to live to finish your dissertation?" Leo looked from her intense face to Kale's stoic one, then at the bank of monitors showing a city that was suddenly full of invisible monsters. He thought of the monk in Constantinople. He thought of the Shadow Woman. He thought of his father's stories of survival. He took a deep, shuddering breath. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his gut. But beneath it, something else was stirring. The historian's curiosity, the blacksmith's son's defiance. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Cassandra's smile was thin and sharp. "We need you to remember everything you saw, every detail. Because you didn't just witness a ritual, Leo. You may have just seen the opening move in a war that will burn the world down, and we need to know what we're up against." Chapter 3. The Unlikely Witness. For the next hour, Leo sat at the high-tech table, a cold cup of coffee untouched in front of him. Cassandra and Kale grilled him, their questions rapid-fire and precise. "The symbol," Cassandra pressed, sliding a tablet toward him with a drawing app open. "Recreate it, exactly as you saw it." Leo's hand trembled as he tried to draw the jagged intersecting lines within the circle. It was like trying to recall a nightmare upon waking. The details slithered away from his conscious mind. It was asymmetric. This line here was sharper, and it ended in a kind of hook. He shook his head in frustration. "I'm sorry. It was dark. It was moving." "It's all right," Cassandra said, though her eyes were disappointed. She took the tablet and showed the crude drawing to Kale. He studied it, his brow furrowed. "Infernal sigil. Old one," Kale rumbled. "A summoning circle!" But not for a foot soldier. The hook suggests a binding component. They weren't just letting something in. They were trying to control it. Anchor it to the focus. "Anchor what?" Leo asked. "Something powerful," was all Kale said, returning to his weapon maintenance. "The chanting," Cassandra continued. "You said it was guttural. Could you recognize any of it? Any words at all?" Leo closed his eyes, trying to block out the hum of the servers and the memory of his own panic. He heard the cadence again, the harsh syllables. There was a word, "Koth," repeated several times, and something that sounded like Visago. Cassandra and Cale exchanged a look. It was the first sign of genuine surprise Leo had seen from either of them. Visago, Cassandra repeated softly. That's a prince of hell, a major power. They weren't just opening a door. They were trying to call a specific, high-ranking general through it. She stood up and paced, using a focus that weak. It's insane. It would be like trying to funnel a hurricane through a drinking straw. The human vessels wouldn't survive the process. They'd be incinerated. So it was a failed ritual? Leo asked, a flicker of hope igniting in him. Maybe it doesn't matter. Failed? No, Cale said, snapping his pistol back together with a definitive click. Disrupted. By you. You didn't just see it, kid. You stopped it. The weight of those words settled on Leo. He hadn't just been a passive witness. His clumsiness had potentially derailed something major. Why there? Leo wondered aloud. Why the history archives? It's just a bunch of old junk. Is it? Cassandra asked, turning to one of the monitors. Her fingers flew across a keyboard. The Brooks Building collection. Donated artifacts from the Mediterranean, circa 1920s. A lot of it came from private collectors after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. She pulled up a digital inventory list, her eyes scanning it rapidly. Items recovered from... Here we go. Constantinople. Leo's blood went cold. Constantinople, the city from his dream, from the story his Yaya had told him, the one he'd always thought was just a fanciful tale about a brave ancestor. The focus, Cassandra muttered, more to herself than to them. A shard of obsidian, black volcanic glass, often used as a ritual focus for infernals because it holds a void-like resonance. She cross-referenced something. Inventory tag B114. Listed as obsidian ritual blade fragment, provenance unknown, circa 12th-13th century. She turned to Leo, her golden eyes alight with a new intensity. It was brought over after the First World War. It's been sitting in that archive for a century. They weren't just performing a ritual in a random place, Leo. They were using a specific, ancient tool. One connected to the last time the compact was broken. The door to the garage opened, and the biker from the video feed walked in. He pulled off his helmet, revealing a man in his late 20s with sharp, handsome features, tousled brown hair, and a smirk that seemed permanently etched on his face. His eyes, a startling bright blue, scanned the room and landed on Leo. "Well, hello there, damsel in distress," he said, his voice a cheerful baritone. "I'm Gabriel. I just saved your friends from having their brains turned into angel food cake. You're welcome." He tossed his helmet onto a couch and strode over to the table, grabbing an apple from a bowl. "Gabriel," Cassandra said, a note of warning in her voice. "What? I did. They were about to do a deep clean on the funny one. The guy has a truly impressive collection of puns in his head. It was a tragedy narrowly averted." He took a loud bite of the apple and winked at Leo. "Don't worry, they're home safe. Confused, but safe. I'm the handsome stranger on a motorcycle who made some weirdos go away. They'll probably make up a better story by morning." Despite his terror, Leo felt a bizarre sense of relief. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it. Gabriel waved a dismissive hand. "All in a day's work. So this is the guy who kicked the hornet's nest? Doesn't look like much." He leaned closer, his blue eyes suddenly losing their mirth, becoming piercing and ancient. "Let's have a proper look." Before Leo could react, Gabriel reached out and placed his thumb in the center of Leo's forehead. A jolt, like a static shock, went through Leo's body. His vision whited out. He felt a presence in his mind, not violent or scouring like the Celestials would have been, but inquisitive, like a master librarian scanning the shelves. He felt it pause at the memory of the ritual, the sigil, the chanting. It lingered on the shadowy form he'd seen behind the guard. Then it stumbled upon the older memory, the one from his childhood that felt more like a dream. The burning city, the golden-eyed monk, the beautiful woman with shadow wings. Gabriel yanked his hand back as if he'd been burned. The smirk was utterly gone, replaced by stark astonishment. He took a step back, looking from Leo to Cassandra. "Cass!" he said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't know," she replied, her gaze fixed on Leo, now with a new, unreadable expression. "What is it?" Gabriel stared at Leo with something akin to awe. He's a seer, a true one, not just a witness to a ritual. He's got the sight buried in there deep. And more. He ran a hand through his hair. He's seen a seraph, up close, and a duke of hell, and lived. This wasn't tonight. This was a long time ago. Cale stopped what he was doing and turned fully to look at Leo, his gray eyes now filled with a wary respect. "What are you talking about?" Leo asked, his head spinning. "The memory you have," Cassandra said slowly, moving toward him. "The city on fire, the man with golden eyes, the woman with fire in hers. That wasn't a dream, was it?" Leo shook his head, numb. "Constantinople, 1204. My family's story. I thought it was just a story." "It's a bloodline memory," Gabriel said, his usual flippancy gone. "Your ancestor, the blacksmith's son." He saw the breaking of the compact. He was touched by both sides. That kind of trauma, it echoes. It gets passed down. You were born with the potential to see them, Leo, to see through the human disguises to the true forms beneath. That's why the ritual's energy didn't just make you feel queasy. It activated something in you. It blew the doors off your latent ability. Cassandra looked at him, and for the first time, Leo saw something other than calculation in her eyes. It was something like hunger. "That's why you saw the ritual so clearly. That's why you could recall the name Vasago." A normal human mind would have shut down, would have rationalized it away. Yours didn't. A slow smile spread across her face. "You're not a liability, Leo Valerian." She leaned on the table, her face inches from his. "You're an asset, the first human seer to emerge in centuries, and you might just be the key to stopping this war before it starts." Chapter 4. The Bunker. The word asset hung in the air, cold and heavy. Leo didn't feel like an asset. He felt like a specimen under a microscope, examined by three beings who were so much more than human. The revelation about his ancestry, about this site, was a dizzying puzzle piece that somehow made the picture even more terrifying. "A seer?" he finally managed. "What does that even mean?" "It means your perception operates on a different frequency," Cassandra explained, her earlier intensity replaced by a focused lecturing tone. "Most humans are blissfully unaware. Their minds automatically filter out the supernatural, rationalizing it away as a trick of the light, a bad dream. Your mind doesn't. You perceive the truth behind the glamour, the reality behind the flesh suits. It's a rare genetic trait, almost always tied to a bloodline that had direct contact with our world." "So I'm crazy?" Leo asked, half hoping the answer was yes. Crazy was a problem you could medicate. Gabriel barked a laugh. "Buddy, in this line of work, being sane is the real disability. Crazy means you're paying attention." "It means you're vulnerable," Cale corrected, his voice a low rumble. He had moved to the weapons rack and was selecting a large, wicked-looking combat knife, checking its edge. "And valuable. Both sides will want you. The Infernals will want to tear your eyes out to use as focusing lenses for their rituals. The Celestials will want to lock you in a golden cage and use you as a divine bloodhound." He slid the knife into a sheath at his back. "The fact that you're here with us is a miracle." A soft, melodic chime echoed through the room, cutting through the tension. One of the monitors on the wall flashed red. A complex, multi-layered map of the city appeared, with a pulsating red dot blinking over the Potrero Hill neighborhood. Their neighborhood. Cassandra was at the console in an instant, her fingers flying. "Proximity alert! Triangulated energy signature. Celestial." Her voice was clipped professional, but Leo heard the underlying thread of alarm. "Already?" Gabriel said, his smirk finally vanishing. "They found us fast!" "They must have tracked the residual energy from my intervention at the bar," Gabriel muttered, grabbing his helmet. "Or they put a trace on your car, Cass." "Doesn't matter," Cassandra said, bringing up a feed from a traffic camera a few blocks away. A white van, unmarked and pristine, was cruising slowly down the street. It looked like any other utility vehicle, but its movement was wrong. It was hunting. "They're 3 blocks out, converging, standard seek and secure pattern." Cale tossed a heavy, armored vest to Gabriel and started strapping on his own. "The safe house is compromised. We move. Now." The room erupted into a controlled frenzy. Gabriel began typing furiously at another terminal. "Initiating data purge and scrub protocol. Won't stop them, but it'll slow down their forensic team." Cale threw open a panel in the wall that Leo had assumed was a circuit breaker. Instead, it was a compact armory. He pulled out a sleek, black submachine gun and tossed it to Cassandra, who caught it without looking and began checking the magazine with practiced ease. "Leo," Cassandra said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Come here!" She grabbed a small metallic disc from a drawer and pressed it against the side of his neck. There was a brief pinch, and a cool sensation spread under his skin. "What was that?" he asked, rubbing his neck. "Tracer! And a weak dampening field. It won't hide you from a direct scan, but it'll make you harder to find in a crowd. It also means we can find you if you get lost." She slung the submachine gun over her shoulder. "Which you will not do. You stick to me or Kale like glue. Understood?" Leo could only nod, his heart thumping a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was real. They were coming for him. Gabriel slammed his hand on a large red button. With a deep hum, a section of the concrete floor in the garage began to descend, revealing a hidden ramp leading into a lower level. "Bunker is live! Let's go, kids! Field trip! The car is tagged!" Cassandra said. "We go on foot." Kale, point. Gabriel, rear guard. Leo, with me. Kale didn't hesitate. He moved to the interior door leading into the house, pressing his ear against it for a second before nodding. He flung it open and moved through the darkened living room with a predator's silence, his large frame somehow making no sound. Cassandra pushed Leo after him. Gabriel brought up the rear, now holding a pistol that looked like it could stop a truck. They moved through the quiet, normal-looking house. Leo saw family photos on the mantelpiece. A fiction, he realized, part of the cover. They exited through the front door into a small walled garden. The night air was cool and still. Over the wall, quick and quiet, Kale whispered. Suddenly, the street was flooded with light. The white van screeched to a halt right outside the garden gate. The side door slid open. 3 figures emerged. They were different from the ones at the bar. They wore long, cream-colored coats that seemed to defy the breeze. Their faces were androgynous and serene, but their eyes glowed with a soft, unwavering white light. Each held a long silver rod, intricately carved. They didn't speak. They simply raised their rods. "Down!" Kale roared, shoving Leo behind a large ceramic planter. The air sizzled. Beams of concentrated white energy lanced from the rods, striking the planter. The ceramic didn't shatter. It dissolved, turning to dust that glittered in the light. Gabriel didn't wait. He popped up from behind a bench, his pistol barking twice. The shots weren't aimed to kill. They struck the pavement near the lead Celestial's feet, spraying chips of asphalt. The Celestials flinched back, their perfect serenity broken for a microsecond. A tactical distraction. It was all Kale needed. He moved. It was like watching an avalanche decide to change direction. He crossed the garden in 2 strides, his combat knife flashing. He didn't stab. He slashed horizontally, aiming for the rods. The blade, etched with faint angular runes, met the first rod. There was a shriek of tearing metal and a burst of actinic light. The rod shattered in the Celestial's hand. Cassandra was up, her submachine gun set on 3 round bursts. She fired at the van's tires and engine block, the reports deafening in the quiet neighborhood. The van slumped on its axles, smoke pouring from the hood. "Go! Go, go!" Gabriel yelled, providing covering fire. Kale grabbed Leo by the collar and literally threw him over the back garden wall. Leo landed hard on the asphalt of an alley, the breath knocked out of him. Cassandra vaulted the wall gracefully, landing in a crouch beside him. Keel came over next, a mountain of muscle and weaponry. Gabriel was the last over, sliding down beside them. "Neighbors are going to be pissed and awake." He pointed down the alley. "This way?" 2 blocks to the extraction point. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The Celestials wouldn't want a confrontation with human law enforcement any more than the Nephilim did. They ran. Leo's lungs burned, his legs screaming in protest. He was propelled by a pure primal fear. Behind them, he could hear a sound like chiming glass and a frustrated, unearthly cry. They burst out of the alley onto a busier street. A beat-up, nondescript delivery van was idling at the curb. The side door slid open as they approached. "Get in!" a woman's voice called from the driver's seat. They piled into the back of the van. As the door slammed shut, the vehicle pulled away from the curb, merging into the late-night traffic. In the darkness of the van, lit only by the passing streetlights, Leo gasped for air, his body trembling with adrenaline and terror. Kale was checking his knife for damage. Gabriel was already reloading his pistol. Cassandra looked at Leo, her face illuminated for a moment by a sodium light. She wasn't even breathing hard. "Welcome to your first firefight, Seer," she said. "The first of many. Now you understand. There's no going back." The van sped into the night, leaving the battle, the safe house, and Leo's old life far behind. Chapter 5. The Oracle's Price. The delivery van smelled of old vegetables and engine oil. It rattled and shook as it navigated the streets of San Francisco, a stark contrast to the smooth, terrifying ride in Cassandra's sedan. Leo sat on a cold metal floor, his back against the van's wall, trying to steady his breathing. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a hollow, shaky feeling in its wake. The driver, a woman with sharp features and dark hair tied in a messy bun, glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "Rough night, kids." Her voice was raspy, laced with a dark humor. "Just the usual, Raph," Gabriel said, slumping against the wall opposite Leo. "Angels trying to vaporize us. Safe house blown to hell, you know. Tuesday." The driver, Raph, snorted. "You Nephilim, always so dramatic." Her eyes flicked to Leo in the mirror again, and this time they lingered. They were a deep, knowing brown, and for a moment they seemed to hold a flicker of the same ancient light he saw in the others, though dimmer, more weary. "So this is the package? Doesn't look like much." "He's a seer, Raph," Cassandra said, her voice tight. She was peering through a small crack in the van's side door, watching the streets behind them. "A real one." Raph's eyebrows shot up. "No shit?" She took a longer look at Leo. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't seen one of you in a dog's age." "No wonder the winged wonders are in a tizzy." She shook her head and focused on the road. "Hang on back there." The van took a sharp turn, throwing Leo against Cale's solid bulk. The big man didn't even sway. "Where are we going?" Leo asked, his voice hoarse. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Raph called back. "A neutral zone, of sorts." They drove in silence for another 20 minutes, the sounds of the city gradually fading. Leo guessed they were heading south, toward the industrial areas. Finally, the van slowed and turned onto a bumpy road, the sound of the tires changing from a smooth hum to a crunching gravel. The van stopped. Raph killed the engine. "Everybody out, and try to look like you belong here," she said, opening the driver's door. They climbed out into a vast, dimly lit scrapyard. Towers of crushed cars loomed against the night sky like metallic mountains. Piles of rusting appliances and twisted rebar formed a labyrinthine landscape. The air smelled of oil, rust, and decay. Raph led them through the maze with the familiarity of a lifelong resident. She stopped before a particularly large stack of shipping containers, welded together haphazardly. She knocked on a rust-streaked door, a complex rhythmic pattern. A slit opened at eye level. A pair of suspicious, bloodshot eyes peered out. The eyes scanned Raph, then the group behind her, lingering on Cale's weapon and Gabriel's smirk. "Raph," a gravelly voice said from behind the door. "You bring trouble." "I bring customers, Malak," Raph replied smoothly. "Trouble is just their traveling companion. Now open up. We're feeling exposed." There was a series of heavy thunks and the screech of metal bolts being drawn back. The door swung inward, revealing a short, stocky man with a greasy beard and a permanent squint. He was human, Leo was sure of it, but he looked at the group of Nephilim with a weary resignation that suggested he'd seen it all before. "Fine. In quickly," Malak grumbled, stepping aside. They filed into a space that was a bizarre fusion of a junkyard and a high-tech command center. The walls were the corrugated steel of shipping containers, but they were lined with monitors showing security feeds from all over the scrapyard. Weapons were stacked next to piles of copper wire. A sophisticated radio setup shared a table with a half-disassembled lawnmower engine. This was a fence, a procurer of goods and information for a clientele that wasn't entirely human. "Neutral ground, Malak," Cassandra said, her tone making it a warning, not a statement. "Neutral," Malak agreed, nodding nervously. "Always neutral. You know me. I don't take sides. I just provide services. For a price." His beady eyes landed on Leo again. "He's new, and he smells of celestial attention. That's bad for business." "He's under our protection," Cale said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Malak flinched and took a step back. "We need to know what they're planning, Malak," Cassandra said, getting down to business. "The Infernals are performing open rituals with ancient foci. The Celestials are conducting aggressive sweeps. The Compact is hanging by a thread. What are you hearing?" Malak rubbed his beard, looking conflicted. "Hearing things. Crazy things. Word is, a major power is trying to cross over. Not just a whisper, not a possession. A full physical manifestation. Someone big, someone old. Vasago, Leo said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Malak's jaw dropped. How does he know that name? He's a seer, you idiot, Raph said, lighting a cigarette. He sees things. It's his whole thing. Malak looked at Leo with a new, fearful respect. Then you know why everyone is so jumpy. A prince of hell hasn't walked the earth in a millennium. The energy required, it would be a cataclysm. It would make the San Francisco earthquake look like a tremor. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The word is, they found a way to anchor him. Not to a place, to a person. A vessel strong enough to hold him. A Nephilim? Gabriel asked, his usual humor gone. Maybe, Malak said with a shrug. Or something else. Something new. His eyes darted toward Leo again, and a cold knot tightened in Leo's stomach. The focus we saw, Leo said, the pieces clicking together in his historian's mind. The obsidian shard. It wasn't just for a beacon. It was a key. And the ritual. They weren't just calling him, they were trying to identify the lock, the vessel. Cassandra stared at him, a dawning horror on her face. They were taking a census, scanning the city's metaphysical signature, looking for the one soul capable of containing a prince of hell. She turned to Malak. We need to find that focus. The shard. Where is it now? Malak held up his hands. Whoa, that is way above my pay grade. That kind of artifact. It's hot. Everyone is looking for it. Celestials, infernals, independents. It's the most wanted rock in the world right now. Then find out, Cassandra said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. She stepped closer to Malak, and despite his squalid surroundings, he seemed to shrink under her gaze. Your neutrality is a luxury we can revoke, Malak. You hear everything. So, listen harder. Malak swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. It'll cost you. It always does, Gabriel sighed, pulling a thick wad of cash from his jacket and tossing it on the table. It was followed by a small, polished gem that seemed to drink the light from the room. That should cover the retainer. Malak's eyes gleamed as he scooped up the payment. I'll see what I can dig up, but you should go. This place won't stay neutral for long if they suspect you're here. As they turned to leave, Leo's eyes fell on a small, dusty object on a cluttered shelf. It was a broken piece of pottery, an old shard with a faded painting on it. It depicted a stylized angel with black wings falling into a pit of fire. Malak noticed his gaze. Ah, a curious one. A fragment from the Levant, 1st century! The fall, before the church sanitized the story. He picked it up and handed it to Leo. A reminder, there are always two sides to a fall. The one who pushes and the one who jumps. Leo took the shard, its surface cool against his skin. For a moment, he felt a dizzying connection to the past, to the long, bloody history of this secret war. Cassandra took his arm, her grip firm. We need to move. They left the scrapyard, the door bolting shut behind them, leaving Malak to his dangerous trade. The night felt darker, the threat more immense. The war wasn't just coming, it was already here, and Leo, for reasons he was only beginning to understand, was standing right in the middle of it. Chapter 6. The Scent of Hell. The beat-up van felt even more claustrophobic on the ride away from Malak's scrapyard. The new information hung in the air like a poison gas. A prince of hell. A vessel. A key. Leo felt the weight of the pottery shard in his pocket, a cold, ancient echo of the conflict he was now trapped in. A vessel! Cassandra muttered, breaking the tense silence. She was staring out the window, but Leo knew she wasn't seeing the passing warehouses. It makes a twisted kind of sense. A physical body of immense power already attuned to infernal energy. It would be the perfect anchor. But who? Or what? A Nephilim would be the obvious choice, Gabriel said, uncharacteristically somber. We're built for it, strong enough to contain the power, part human enough to walk the earth undetected. He glanced around the van. No offense, guys, but if they're scanning for candidates... This van is basically a glowing billboard. They'd need a willing participant, Cale rumbled from the driver's seat, having taken over from Raph, who had melted back into the city. Or one that could be broken. The process of housing a prince isn't gentle. It would burn out most souls like a fuse. Maybe they found a way around that, Leo said quietly. All eyes turned to him. He was getting used to that. The symbol I saw, Cale said it had a binding component. What if it wasn't just to bind what they were calling, but to bind it to the vessel, to force the connection, whether the vessel was willing or not? The implications of that settled over them, cold and grim. "We need to find that shard," Cassandra said, her voice firm. "It's the one tangible lead we have. It's the tool they're using. If we can take it off the board, we slow them down." "And how do we do that?" Leo asked. "The university will be crawling with both sides." "Not the university," Gabriel said, a sly grin returning to his face. He tapped the side of his nose. "Think like a demon. You've got a super important, mega powerful evil rock. The goody two-shoes angels are looking for it. Where do you hide it?" Leo thought. He thought about history, about power, about hiding things in plain sight. You don't hide it. You put it somewhere they'd never dare to look, somewhere so saturated with their own energy it would be camouflaged. Cassandra's eyes lit up. A sanctified place, a church, a cathedral. "St. Mary's Cathedral," Gabriel and Cale said in unison. "It's the biggest, most powerful spiritual landmark in the city," Cale explained. "Its consecrated grounds are a natural barrier to infernal energy. A celestial scanner would ping on the whole building and dismiss it as background holiness. It's the last place they'd look for an infernal focus." "It's also a brilliant psychological move," Leo added, the historian in him taking over. "Hiding your greatest weapon in the heart of your enemy's territory. It's audacious. It's what a proud ancient general would do." "Then that's where we're going," Cassandra decided. "We get in, find the shard, get out, in and out, like ghosts." They parked the van several blocks from the cathedral in the shadow of a multi-story car park. The night was deep now, the streets mostly empty. St. Mary's loomed ahead, its modern, sweeping white architecture like great concrete wings reaching for the sky. "Okay, listen up," Cassandra said, turning to the group. "Cale, you're on perimeter. Watch for celestial patrols. Their presence here will be light. It's their turf. They get complacent, but it won't be zero. Gabriel, you're on overwatch. Get to a high point. Monitor comms. Leo, you're with me." "Me?" Leo squeaked. "What can I do?" "You're our bloodhound," she said. "You're the only one who's seen the focus up close, who's felt its energy. That connection might be enough for your sight to lead us right to it. Now focus. Remember the feeling in the archive. The cold, the wrongness, the violet light. Try to find that signal again." They moved toward the cathedral grounds. Cale melted into the shadows of the surrounding trees. Gabriel scaled a nearby building with effortless, silent grace, disappearing onto the roof. Cassandra led Leo to a side entrance, a small wooden door used by staff. She produced a set of lockpicks that looked both ancient and incredibly precise. Within seconds, the lock clicked open. The inside of the cathedral was vast and silent. The air was cool and smelled of incense and polished wood. Moonlight streamed through the massive stained glass windows, painting colorful geometric shapes on the floors and pews. It was peaceful, holy. But as they moved deeper into the nave toward the altar, Leo began to feel it, a discordant note, a stain on the serenity. "Do you feel that?" he whispered, his skin prickling. Cassandra nodded, her jaw tight. "A corruption, like a single drop of ink in holy water." "It's here." Leo closed his eyes, trying to push past the overwhelming sense of peace, to find the sharp, invasive signal he'd felt in the archive. He turned slowly, like a compass needle searching for north. Then he had it, a cold thread pulling at him. It was coming from the left, away from the main altar. "This way," he said, his voice more confident now. He led Cassandra through a doorway and down a narrow flight of stairs into the crypt. The air grew colder, damper. The feeling of wrongness intensified, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. They entered a low-ceilinged chamber used for storage. Old vestments, candle holders, and broken pews were stacked against the walls. And there, sitting on a simple wooden shelf next to a box of spare hymnals, was the shard of obsidian. It looked innocuous, just a piece of black glass. But to Leo's sight, it pulsed with a malevolent, dark energy, a heart of pure void beating in the heart of the sacred space. "Unbelievable," Cassandra breathed. "They just left it here." She approached it cautiously, pulling a lead-line pouch from inside her jacket. "The lead should contain its signature long enough for us to get it out of here." As her fingers closed around the shard, a voice spoke from the shadows behind them, smooth as oil and cold as the grave. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. It's so terribly rude to take what isn't yours. Leo spun around. A man stepped out from behind a stone pillar. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit. He was handsome, with sharp features and dark hair slicked back. He looked like a wealthy venture capitalist. But his eyes were the problem. They were the color of a bruise, a deep, suffocating violet, and they held a bored, ancient malice that made Leo's soul shrink back. This was no possessed foot soldier. This was something else, something far more. Cassandra shoved the shard into the pouch and spun around, raising her submachine gun. "Stay back." The man smiled, a thin, cruel expression. "Or what? You'll shoot me in a house of God?" The irony would be delicious, but the bullet would be inconvenient. He took a step forward, and the air grew colder. The candles in the wall sconces flickered and died. "I must thank you, really. We knew the Nephilim would be sniffing around. We just didn't think you'd be so kind as to deliver the one thing we want even more than the key." His violet eyes locked onto Leo. "The lock." Leo felt a pressure in his mind, a cold, probing presence that was infinitely more invasive than Gabriel's had been. It was like being touched by a corpse. Cassandra didn't hesitate. She fired a 3-round burst directly at the man's chest. The man, the demon, flinched as the bullet struck him, but he didn't fall. Dark, viscous fluid, like crude oil, welled from the holes in his expensive suit. He looked down at the wounds with an expression of mild annoyance. "That," he said, his voice dropping into a guttural register that was no longer human, "was a mistake." He raised a hand. The shadows in the crypt deepened, coalescing into solid, grasping tendrils of darkness that shot toward them. "Run!" Cassandra screamed, shoving Leo toward the stairs. They burst out of the crypt and into the main cathedral, the sound of the demon's laughter echoing behind them. The tendrils of shadow snaked after them, smashing pews and scraping across the marble floor. "Gabriel! Kale! We're out! We've got a major infernal presence!" Cassandra yelled into her comms. They crashed through the main doors and out into the night. Kale was already there, his massive knife in hand. Gabriel landed on the pavement beside them from his rooftop perch, his pistol drawn. The suited demon emerged from the cathedral doors, walking calmly. The bullet wounds in his chest were already closing, the dark fluid receding. The shadows writhed around him like a living cloak. "The lock belongs to us," he said, his voice now a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from the ground itself. "You cannot protect him." Kale let out a battle roar and charged, his knife aimed for the demon's throat. The demon didn't even move. A tentacle of shadow lashed out, moving faster than the eye could follow. It wrapped around Kale's wrist and squeezed. There was a sickening crunch of bone. Kale cried out in pain and rage, dropping his knife. Gabriel opened fire, the shots punching into the demon's shadowy shield, doing no visible damage. This was a power beyond anything they had faced. They were outmatched. Cassandra grabbed Leo's arm, her face a mask of desperation. "We have to go now!" As they turned to flee, the demon's voice followed them, a promise whispered on the wind that seemed to go directly into Leo's mind. "We see you, Seer. We have your scent. There is nowhere you can run that we will not find you. You are ours." They ran into the welcoming darkness of the city, but for the first time, Leo knew that no darkness was deep enough to hide him anymore. Chapter 7. The Broken Compact. They ran until the sound of their own pounding hearts was louder than the echo of the demon's threat. They didn't stop until they were 5 blocks away, ducking into the grimy, urine-scented sanctuary of a BART station entrance. Kale was cradling his wrist, his face pale with pain and fury. The bones weren't just broken, they were pulverized. "What the hell was that?" Gabriel gasped, leaning against the tiled wall, his chest heaving. "That wasn't some possessed suit, that was a duke," Cassandra finished, her voice tight. She was peering out into the street, her body coiled like a spring. "A high-ranking infernal wearing a crafted body, not just possessing a human. They can only maintain that kind of manifestation for short periods outside of a hellmouth. He's powerful, but he's stretched thin being here." She turned to Kale. "Let me see." Kale grunted, holding out his arm. The wrist was already swelling, the skin turning a deep, ugly purple. Cassandra placed her hands on it, her eyes fluttering shut. A soft, golden light emanated from her palms, washing over the injury. Leo heard a series of faint, wet clicks and pops as the bones realigned themselves. Cale didn't make a sound, but sweat beaded on his forehead. After a moment, the light faded. Cassandra swayed, looking drained. "It's set, not healed. You'll need a splint, and no fighting for a week." "A week we don't have," Cale growled, flexing his fingers gingerly. "He knew me," Leo said, the words tumbling out. He was shaking. The demon's violet eyes burned into his memory. "He called me the Lock. He said they had my scent." Cassandra's expression was grim. "The ritual in the archive. It wasn't just a beacon or a census. It was a targeting scan. And you, with your awakened sight, you shone brighter than a supernova. You're not just a potential vessel, Leo. Your unique connection, your bloodline. You might be the only vessel capable of holding a Prince of Hell without being immediately annihilated. You're not a key. You're the entire lock-in mechanism." The full, horrifying truth of it crashed down on him. He wasn't a bystander. He was the prize. "We need to move," Gabriel said, his usual levity utterly absent. "Duke Fancy Pants back there might be on a leash, but you can bet he's called every low-level fiend in the city to come find us." As if on cue, the streetlights at the end of the block flickered and died, plunging the street into darkness. A low, guttural, chittering sound echoed from the shadows, followed by the scrape of claws on asphalt. "Too late," Cale said, pulling a compact pistol from a holster at his ankle with his good hand. "They're here." Figures began to emerge from the alleys and doorways. They were not like the suited Duke. These were the foot soldiers. Their human forms were distorted, eyes glowing with faint red or yellow light, limbs moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. Some held makeshift weapons, pipes, knives. Their faces were slack, their humanity hollowed out, leaving only hungry, malicious shells. "They're corralling us," Cassandra said, her submachine gun already up and aimed. "Pushing us toward the station. It's a trap." "Only one way to go, then," Gabriel said, his pistol held steady. "Down." They backed into the BART station entrance, moving down the stairs. The chittering followed them, a wave of distorted flesh and infernal intent. The few late-night commuters on the platform took one look at the advancing horde and fled screaming toward the exits. "So much for keeping a low profile," Gabriel muttered. The first of the possessed reached the bottom of the stairs. Cassandra didn't hesitate. Her submachine gun barked, 3-round bursts that struck center mass. The creatures shrieked and fell, dark smoke pouring from the wounds. But more poured in behind them, scrambling over the fallen bodies. Cale and Gabriel fired with precision, each shot dropping a creature. But there were too many, an ocean of them flooding the station. "We're not going to make it," Leo yelled, pressing his back against a ticket machine. Suddenly, a brilliant, blinding white light filled the station. It was accompanied by a sound like 1,000 church bells ringing in perfect harmony. The light was pure, searing, and it hurt. Leo cried out, shielding his eyes. The possessed creatures shrieked in agony, this time a sound of genuine terror. They recoiled from the light, scrambling over each other to get away, their forms smoking and sizzling as if under a holy UV lamp. Standing at the top of the stairs were 3 figures. They were clad in armor that seemed to be made of solidified moonlight, intricate and impossibly beautiful. They held blazing swords of pure white fire that lit up the entire station. Their faces were perfect, serene, and utterly devoid of mercy. Celestials. The real deal. Not proxies in trench coats, but warriors of heaven. They moved down the stairs, their movements a ballet of absolute destruction. Their blazing swords cut through the horde of possessed like a scythe through wheat. The infernals didn't just fall. They were unmade, their forms dissolving into nothingness under the celestial fire. In less than a minute, the station was cleared. The only sounds were the fading hum of the celestial blades and the drip of water from a pipe. The lead celestial turned its gaze toward Leo and the Nephilim. Its eyes were pools of liquid light. It raised its sword, pointing the tip not at the retreating infernals, but at Cassandra. "Nephilim," its voice echoed, a sound that was both beautiful and terrifying. "You harbor the abomination. Surrender it, and you may yet be granted purification." "It has a name," Leo said, stepping forward, a surge of defiance overriding his fear. "And I'm not going anywhere with you." The Celestial's head tilted. Its gaze felt like being physically scanned, every cell of his body laid bare. "The potential vessel is defiant. The corruption has already begun. The taint must be excised before it can be used. Its meaning was clear. They weren't here to save him. They were here to kill him. Cassandra moved in front of Leo, her weapon raised, though it seemed pathetic against the celestial warrior. He is under our protection. The compact still stands. You have no authority here. The compact was broken the moment the infernals targeted this soul for desecration. The celestial intoned, its voice devoid of emotion. Our authority is the divine mandate to protect creation, by any means necessary. This is a mercy. The other two celestials fanned out, their blazing swords humming with lethal intent. They were going to kill them all. Just as the lead celestial took a step forward, a new voice cut through the tension, sharp and authoritative. "Stand down, Seraphiel." Another figure descended the stairs. This one wore the same moonlight armor, but it was adorned with intricate gold filigree. Its wings, real, shimmering, ethereal wings, were partially unfolded, filling the space with their radiance. Its presence was immense, dwarfing the others. The lead celestial, Seraphiel, lowered its sword slightly. "Archangel Uriel, these Nephilim protect the vessel. The risk is too great." "I am aware of the risk." Uriel's voice was like a mountain speaking, ancient and immovable. Its gaze swept over the group, lingering on Leo with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. "But the compact is not yet fully broken. And the Nephilim, for all their imperfections, are still signatories. To slaughter them in the open would be an act of war, a war we are not yet prepared to win." Uriel's eyes locked with Cassandra's. "You have a reprieve, daughter of sin. You have taken the key. Now you seek to protect the lock, a noble if futile endeavor. We will be watching." The Archangel turned its back on them, a gesture of supreme dismissal. "The area is secure. Withdraw." The celestial warriors, Seraphiel and the others, looked for a moment as if they might argue, but then they simply vanished, dissolving into motes of light. Uriel was the last to go. It paused at the top of the stairs and looked back at Leo, its expression unreadable. "Choose your side wisely, child of man, for when the storm comes, there will be no shelter for those who stand in the middle." And then it too was gone. The BART station was silent, empty except for the four of them and the smell of ozone and burnt evil. Leo sank to the floor, his legs giving out. He looked at the Nephilim. Cassandra's face was pale, Gabriel's was grim, and Kale was staring at the spot where the Celestials had been with pure, undiluted hatred. The compact was in tatters. They were trapped between two armies, each more powerful than they could imagine, each wanting Leo for their own apocalyptic purpose. And the storm was coming. Chapter 8. The only play left. The silence in the BART station was heavier than the earlier gunfire and screams. The air still crackled with the residual energy of celestial power and the oily residue of vanquished demons. Leo sat on the cold, grimy floor, trying to process the fact that two different factions of supernatural beings had just declared him the ultimate weapon in a war he never knew existed. Kale was the first to move. He found a length of metal piping ripped from the wall during the fight, and with a grunt and a helping hand from Gabriel, fashioned a crude splint for his wrist. His face was a stoic mask, but pain glittered in his gray eyes. "We can't stay here," Cassandra said, her voice hollow. She was staring at the lead-lined pouch containing the obsidian shard as if it were a live grenade. The Celestials have withdrawn, not surrendered. They're watching. And the Infernals will be regrouping. That Duke won't give up. "Give up?" Gabriel let out a shaky laugh that held no humor. "Cass, he called us an appetizer. We're not just on the menu. We are the menu. We've got angels who want to dissect him, demons who want to wear him like a suit, and a hell rock that's basically a homing beacon for both. What's the play? Where do we possibly go that they can't find us?" The hopelessness of their situation pressed down on them. They were rats in a maze designed by gods and monsters. Leo slowly got to his feet. His legs felt like jelly, but his mind, his historian's mind, was racing, sifting through the fragments of information. He thought of the Archangel's words, "Choose your side wisely." He thought of the Demon Duke's claim, "You are ours." He thought of the Nephilim, caught in the middle, protecting him at immense cost. And he thought of the one piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. "The vessel," Leo said, his voice cutting through the despair. They all turned to look at him. "The Duke called me the lock. Uriel called me the vessel. You all assume they're talking about me containing this Prince Vasago. It's the only thing that makes sense, Cassandra said. Is it? Leo challenged, a spark of his academic curiosity igniting through the fear. Think about it. The Infernals performed a complex, dangerous ritual to find a suitable vessel. They scanned the entire city. Why go to all that trouble if their intended vessel was me, a guy with a specific, traceable bloodline they could have just looked up in their infernal genealogy records? My family history isn't exactly a secret. Gabriel frowned. He's got a point. Your file's probably in the celestial records, too. Anomalous bloodline monitor. They'd both have known about you. So why the scan? Leo pressed. They weren't just looking for a vessel. They were looking for the perfect vessel. The one with the exact right metaphysical resonance, or whatever you call it. What if I'm not it? Cale's eyes narrowed. The Duke seemed pretty sure. He saw me after my sight was activated by the ritual, Leo argued. I was shining like a beacon. He smelled the power and assumed. But what if he was wrong? What if the ritual wasn't about pinpointing me, but about identifying the actual candidate? The implications hung in the air, a new, terrifying possibility. You're saying there's someone else out there, Cassandra whispered, her golden eyes wide with dawning horror. The true vessel, and the Infernals now have their name and address. And we have the key, Leo said, pointing to the pouch in her hand. And we have the scans data. How do you figure that? Gabriel asked. The focus, Leo said, the idea coming together with the clarity of a historical breakthrough. The obsidian shard. It was the receiver, the antenna for the ritual. It wasn't just sending a signal out, it was drawing the data in. The information about the perfect vessel, it's not just floating in the air. It's stored in the shard. A profound silence fell over the group. They were no longer just protecting a person or a weapon. They were safeguarding the most wanted piece of intelligence in the supernatural world. If we can read it, Cassandra breathed. We find the real vessel before they do, Leo finished. We get to them first. And then what? Cale's voice was a low growl. We kill an innocent human to prevent the prince from using them? Is that our play now? Doing the Celestials' dirty work for them? The grim reality of the option settled over them. No, Leo said firmly. We protect them. We hide them. We use the information to set a trap. It's the only advantage we have. It's the only play left. Cassandra looked at Leo, a strange expression on her face. Respect mixed with a deep, weary sadness. You understand what you're suggesting? If we're right and we find this person, we become the sole guardians of the most important soul on the planet. Every demon in creation will be coming for us. The Celestials will see it as proof we're working with the Infernals. There will be no neutral ground, no safe place. Leo met her gaze. He thought of Miles and Maya, their minds almost scoured clean. He thought of the possessed, their humanity erased. He thought of the Celestials' cold offer of mercy. He thought of the Blacksmith's son in Constantinople witnessing the start of this war. He was done being a prize. He was done being a victim of history. I'm not asking for safe, Leo said, his voice steady for the first time that night. I'm asking to fight. You said I was an asset, so let's asset the hell out of this. How do we read the rock? A slow, fierce smile spread across Gabriel's face. I love it when the damsel gets proactive. He turned to Cassandra. He's right, Cass. It's the only move we've got. And I might know a guy. Well, not a guy. A gal. A very, very scary gal who specializes in prying secrets out of things that don't want to give them up. Cassandra's jaw tightened. Lilith. The one and only, Gabriel said with a theatrical wince. She's going to charge a fortune. We don't have a fortune, Cale stated. We have something better, Cassandra said, her eyes hardening with resolve. She held up the pouch containing the obsidian shard. We have the down payment, and we have the one thing she values more than any artifact. She looked at Leo. A story, a secret, the biggest one in the world. She made a decision, her posture shifting from defensive to offensive. All right, new plan. We go to the one person both sides fear. We go to the information broker to end all information brokers. We go to the last librarian. She slung her weapon. Let's see what the shard has to say. It was a desperate, dangerous gamble. They were walking into the lion's den with the lion's favorite meal. But for the first time since this nightmare began, they had a direction. They had a target, and they had a choice to make that was entirely their own. Chapter 9. The Last Librarian. They moved through the city like ghosts, avoiding main thoroughfares, sticking to the shadows that even the streetlights seemed to avoid. Gabriel led the way, his usual flippancy replaced by a focused intensity. The name Lilith hung over them like a thundercloud. "Who is she?" Leo asked, finally breaking the tense silence as they navigated a narrow alley behind a row of closed restaurants. "Lilith isn't a who, kid," Gabriel muttered, checking a reflection in a puddle. "She's a what? A force of nature, the original independent contractor." "She's older than the compact," Cassandra added, her voice low. "Some say she was there when it was signed. She predates the current management of both sides. She deals in information. The older, darker, and more dangerous, the higher the price." "And she's trustworthy?" Leo asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. Kale let out a sound that was almost a laugh. "She is predictably self-interested. Her currency is secrets and power. If your secret is valuable enough, she will uphold her end of the bargain with absolute fidelity. Betrayal is bad for business, but if a better offer comes along..." "She'll sell us out before we can blink," Gabriel finished. "So we need to make sure our offer is the most interesting thing on her table tonight." Their destination was not what Leo expected. They stopped in front of a sleek, modern art gallery in the Jackson Square district. The sign out front read, "Aethelred Antiquities," in elegant, understated script. The windows were dark, the building silent. Gabriel didn't go to the front door. He led them down a side alley to a reinforced steel door with no handle. There was a small, discreet intercom box. Gabriel pressed the button. A long moment of silence was followed by a click and a smooth, digitally rendered female voice. "State your business." "Gabriel, I have a delivery for the librarian, a volume she's been seeking, the Black Codex." Gabriel shot a look at Cassandra, who gave a tight nod of approval. There was another pause. Leo could feel the hum of a hidden scanner passing over them. "The librarian is occupied," the voice stated. "She'll want to make time for this," Gabriel insisted, his voice losing its charm and becoming hard. "Tell her it's not just the Codex. It's the annotated edition, with the original owner's marginalia." The silence this time was longer, more considered. Then, with a series of heavy thunks, the steel door swung inward silently. They stepped into a small, pristine antechamber. The door sealed behind them. The air was cool, filtered, and smelled of ozone and old paper. The walls were bare white. A single, uncomfortable-looking bench sat in the center. The opposite wall slid aside without a sound, revealing a woman. She was ageless. She could have been 30 or 3,000. She had stark white hair cut in a severe bob, and eyes the color of a winter sky, pale, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. She wore a simple black-tailored dress that cost more than Leo's entire graduate school education. She regarded them with a detached, analytical curiosity, like a scientist examining a new species of insect. "Gabriel," she said. Her voice was the same as the intercom's, but now it had a faint, chilling warmth to it, like sunlight on ice. "Your metaphors are as dramatic as ever? The Black Codex? Really?" "You got the meaning, didn't you, Lilith?" Gabriel said, offering a charming smile that seemed to wither under her gaze. Her eyes flicked to Cassandra, then to Kale, noting his splinted wrist with a slight tilt of her head. Finally, they landed on Leo. They lingered. He felt that same invasive scanning sensation he'd felt from Gabriel and the Duke, but this was different. It was colder, more intellectual. It felt like having his entire life story, his genetic code, and his deepest fears downloaded and filed away for future reference. "A seer," she stated, no hint of surprise in her voice. "And not just any seer. The one everyone is so terribly excited about. The potential vessel for the Prince of Stygian Depths." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "You have been busy." "We have the focus from the university ritual," Cassandra said, cutting to the chase. She held up the lead-line pouch. "The obsidian shard." Lilith's smile widened a fraction. It did not reach her eyes. "A trifle. A tool." "A tool that just conducted a citywide metaphysical scan," Leo said, finding his voice. It sounded small in the pristine room. "It contains the data, the identity of the perfect vessel." That got a reaction. Lilith's pale eyes sharpened, her focus narrowing on him with the intensity of a laser. You believe it is not you. I know it's not, Leo said, more confidently than he felt. The ritual was a search party. I was just the lighthouse it accidentally turned on. Lilith was silent for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back through the doorway. Come. They followed her into the heart of her domain. The room beyond was breathtaking. It was a vast, circular library that stretched up several stories. But instead of books, the shelves were lined with artifacts. A spearhead that glowed with a faint blue light, a withered hand clutching a crystal orb, a mirror that showed a swirling nebula instead of a reflection. The air hummed with the power of 1,000 stored secrets. In the center of the room was a dice holding a single sleek black table that looked like it was carved from a single piece of obsidian. Place the focus on the table, Lilith instructed. Cassandra carefully removed the shard from the pouch and set it on the black surface. The moment it made contact, the table began to glow with intricate silver lines that spread across its surface like a circuit board coming to life. Lilith placed her hands on the table on either side of the shard. She closed her eyes. The silver lines flared, and the shard itself began to pulse with a slow, deep violet light. Images and symbols, a dizzying array of mathematical formulas, genetic sequences, and esoteric sigils began to flash across the surface of the table at an impossible speed. Lilith's brow furrowed in concentration. The scan was precise. It filtered for resilience, spiritual capacity, neural plasticity, ancestral resonance, a very specific recipe. Her eyes snapped open, staring at the data stream. Fascinating. The primary candidate is unexpected. Who is it? Cassandra demanded. Lilith didn't answer immediately. She continued to read the data, her expression one of genuine intrigue. The energy signature is masked, partially obscured by a damping field, similar to the one you placed on the seer, but much older, more powerful, a familial protection. Leo's blood ran cold. A familial protection, like the one passed down through a bloodline. Lilith's eyes found his, and for the first time he saw something like pity in their icy depths. The scan didn't just find a candidate, Leo Valerian. It found a bloodline. The perfect vessel isn't you. She paused, letting the tension coil to a breaking point. It's your sister. The world dropped out from under Leo. The hum of the library faded to a distant roar in his ears. Eva. His little sister. The bubbly, brilliant marine biology student who lived in a sunny apartment in Santa Cruz and worried about coral bleaching. The one he called every Sunday. The perfect vessel for a prince of hell. No, he whispered, the word a choked plea. That's not possible. The data is unequivocal, Lilith said, her voice clinical. The damping field on her is what kept her hidden all these years. It's what made the ritual necessary. The Infernals couldn't find her by conventional means, but the scan pierced through. It has her name, her location, everything. She looked at the data one more time, and her pale face tightened. The signal has been triplicated. The Infernals don't just have the data, they've had it for hours. They've already moved. She looked at them, her expression grim. If you want to save your sister, you're already too late. Chapter 10. The Race to Santa Cruz. The world snapped back into focus with the sound of Leo's own heart hammering against his ribs. Eva. The word was a scream in his mind, drowning out everything else. Lilith's clinical tone, the hum of the library, his own terror. Santa Cruz, he breathed, already turning to run. She's in Santa Cruz! Cassandra's hand clamped onto his arm, stopping him. Her grip was like iron. Think, Leo! They've had hours! They will be waiting for us. We can't just charge in. She's my sister! Leo roared, trying to wrench free. The panic was a physical thing, clawing its way up his throat. And she will be dead or worse if we are stupid. Kale's voice boomed through the library, the authority in it finally cutting through Leo's panic. The big Nephilim was already moving toward the exit, his splinted wrist forgotten. We need a plan, not a suicide run. The damping field, Gabriel said, his mind racing. Lilith, you said it was familial, old. What is it? Lilith, who had been observing their panic with detached interest, gestured to the data still flowing across the table. It reads as a benediction, a celestial blessing several generations old, placed on an ancestor to protect the bloodline from infernal influence. It's why the girl was hidden, and why she is such a perfect vessel. The blessing makes her spirit incredibly resilient. It would be the only thing strong enough to contain a prince without shattering. A celestial blessing. The pieces clicked into place for Leo. The monk in Constantinople. The golden-eyed seraph. He hadn't just judged the Crusaders. He had shown mercy to a boy. He had placed a protection on Nikos's bloodline. They're not just taking a vessel, Cassandra realized, her face pale. They're perverting a blessing, turning a divine protection into an infernal cage. The symbolism? The power in that act. It would be catastrophic, Lilith agreed. The resulting entity would be an abomination of unprecedented power. Now, if you'll excuse me, my part in this is concluded. She made a slight gesture, and the silver lines on the table faded, plunging the shard back into dormancy. The price for this consultation will be the focus itself, and the story of what happens next. Take it, Cassandra said, shoving the shard toward her. We have to go. They burst out of the art gallery into the cold night air. The sky was beginning to lighten to a deep gray in the east. Pre-dawn. They had maybe an hour before the city woke up. How do we get to Santa Cruz? The van is compromised. My car is toast. They'll be watching all routes, Gabriel said, pulling out his phone. We don't take a road, Cassandra said, her eyes scanning the skyline. She pointed to a nearby skyscraper, one of the tallest in the city, its top floors shrouded in low-hanging cloud. We take a shortcut. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, Gabriel groaned. What shortcut? Leo asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Nephilim can't fly, Kale explained, already striding toward the building. But we can fall with style. They bypassed the building's main entrance with ease. A locked service door was child's play for Gabriel. They took the service elevator to the roof access, and then the stairs up the final few flights. The door to the roof groaned open, and a gust of wind whipped around them. They stood on the roof, over 50 stories up. The city sprawled beneath them, its lights beginning to dim in the face of the approaching dawn. The air was thin and cold. The principle is simple, Cassandra shouted over the wind. She walked to the edge of the roof, looking south toward the distant, dark band that was the Pacific Ocean. We create a localized atmospheric disturbance, a mist. We ride the currents. It's not flying. It's controlled, high-velocity gliding. That sounds an awful lot like flying with extra steps, Leo yelled back, his knees trembling. It's the only way they won't expect us, she said, and the only way we get there in time. Now, hold on to me. Do not let go. Kale grabbed Leo from behind, locking his massive arms around him. Gabriel wrapped his arms around Kale's waist. Cassandra stood at the front, her arms spread wide. She began to chant, her voice a low hum that resonated in the air around them. The wind began to pick up, swirling around their feet. Moisture condensed out of the air, forming a thick, cool fog that enveloped them, hiding the terrifying drop from view. Now! Cassandra cried, and they stepped off the roof. Leo's scream was ripped away by the wind. They weren't falling. They were surging. The mist held them in a turbulent bubble, howling around them as they shot forward like a cannonball, hurtling over the sleeping city at a terrifying speed. He caught glimpses of the Bay Bridge flashing beneath them, then the dark expanse of the water, then the coastal towns zipping by in a blur. It was the most terrifying experience of his life. In what felt like both an eternity and only seconds, the mist began to slow. The roar of the wind diminished. Leo dared to look down. They were descending rapidly toward a familiar coastal city, its boardwalk and lighthouse just becoming visible in the pre-dawn gloom. Santa Cruz. Cassandra guided them toward a wooded area near the university, away from prying eyes. They landed with a jolt in a clearing, the mist dissipating around them. Leo stumbled out of Kale's grasp and fell to his knees, vomiting onto the pine needles. "Never again!" he gasped. "No time for that," Cassandra said, her face drawn with effort. The glide had taken a lot out of her. "Where does she live?" Leo pointed a shaking hand toward a street of neat older houses a few blocks from campus. Chestnut Street, number 142, second floor. "Kale, with me! Gabriel, overwatch on the roof of that building," Cassandra ordered, pointing to a nearby apartment complex. "Leo, you stay with Gabriel." "No way," Leo said, getting to his feet, wiping his mouth. "She's my sister. She'll be terrified. If she sees you, she'll scream. If she sees me, she might listen." Cassandra looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded sharply. "Fine, but you do exactly what we say. Understood?" They moved through the quiet residential streets. The only sound was the distant crash of waves and the frantic beating of Leo's heart. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every closed window felt like a watching eye. Number 142 was a pale blue Victorian house converted into apartments. Eva's lights were off. Her beat-up Volkswagen Beetle was parked out front. "It looks quiet!" Gabriel's voice came through a tiny earpiece Leo now wore. "Almost too quiet. I've got no visual on any hostels, no infernal signatures, nothing." "That's not right," Cassandra whispered, her golden eyes scanning the area. "They should be here." A cold dread, colder than the ocean mist, seeped into Leo's bones. Maybe we beat them? Even as he said it, he knew it was wrong. Lilith said they had already moved. Cale tested the front door of the building. It was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The interior hallway was dark and silent. They crept up the stairs to the second floor. Eva's apartment door was at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar. Leo's breath caught in his throat. Cassandra pushed the door open, her weapon raised. The apartment was pristine. Not a thing was out of place. The sofa was neat. The books were on the shelves. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the coffee table, gone cold. But the window in the living room was open. The white curtains fluttered in the morning breeze. And on the floor, in the center of the room, was a single perfect black rose. There was no sign of Eva. Gabriel's voice crackled in their ears, tight with urgency. "Guys, we've got a problem. I'm looking at thermal. The whole house is cold, ice cold. And there's no heat signature for your sister anywhere. But I'm reading something else now. A massive energy spike! It's not infernal! It's..." He never finished. The air in the apartment ripped apart. A figure stepped through a tear in reality that glowed with the cold, sterile light of 1,000 stars. It was Uriel, the archangel. Its magnificent wings were fully extended, its armor blazing with divine fury. Its face was a mask of cold, righteous anger. It pointed a glowing finger not at them, but at the black rose on the floor. "The vessel has been taken," Uriel's voice echoed, shaking the very foundations of the house. "By your hand. The Nephilim have chosen their side." The archangel's terrifying gaze fell upon Leo, filled with a devastating disappointment. "You delivered your own sister to hell." Chapter 11. The Framed. The accusation hung in the air, more damaging than any weapon. Uriel's divine light filled the small apartment, not with warmth, but with a scorching, judgmental heat. The black rose on the floor seemed to drink the light, a void of evidence planted perfectly. "No." Leo's denial was a raw, torn thing. "We just got here! We came to save her!" "Lies!" Uriel's voice was flat, absolute. "We tracked the infernal signature. It led here." "To you. The Nephilim, who we allowed to exist out of mercy. The seer, who we considered saving from his tainted bloodline. You have conspired with the forces of the pit. You have stolen the vessel to empower your own kind." "That's insane!" Gabriel's voice shouted through the earpiece. "We're being set up. Look at the signature. It's a residual echo. It's a plant." "The word of a half-breed holds no weight against the evidence," Uriel said, its gaze never leaving Leo. It took a step forward, its hand extending. A sword of pure, blazing white fire materialized in its grip. The air sizzled. "The compact is void. The sentence is purification, starting with the corruptor of the bloodline." This was it. They weren't here to talk. They were here to execute. Cassandra didn't plead. She acted. She shoved Leo backward into Cale and raised her submachine gun. She didn't fire at Uriel. That would be suicide. She fired at the ceiling above the archangel. BR. Rap. The plaster and wooden beams shattered. A large section of the ceiling, along with a heavy light fixture, crashed down on top of Uriel. It was a distraction, not an attack. The debris wouldn't hurt the celestial being, but it gave them a microsecond. "Go!" Cassandra screamed. Cale didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Leo, turned, and smashed through the closed window behind them. Glass and wood exploded outward as they plummeted toward the ground. They landed hard on the lawn below, Cale taking the impact and rolling, shielding Leo with his body. Cassandra landed beside them a second later, already firing back up at the window to cover their retreat. Uriel emerged from the window, untouched by the debris, its wings beating slowly, holding it aloft. Its expression was one of cold, furious majesty. It raised its sword. A shot rang out from the rooftop across the street. Gabriel. It wasn't a normal bullet. It glowed with a faint blue energy and struck Uriel's sword arm. There was a flash of light and a sound like shattering crystal. Uriel roared in surprise and pain, a sound that was less of agony and more of outraged offense. The divine sword flickered. It was all they needed. "Move! To the boardwalk! Lose them in the crowds!" Cassandra yelled, pulling Leo to his feet. They ran. The sun was just cresting the horizon, and the early morning joggers and dog walkers were starting to appear. People stared, open-mouthed, at the scene. 3 people fleeing from a building with a shattered window, and above, a figure of blinding light that their minds desperately tried to rationalize as a trick of the morning sun. Uriel did not follow them into the open. The sight of it would cause too much human attention, a violation of the very rules it was accusing them of breaking. But Leo knew they weren't safe. Celestial enforcers in human guise would already be converging. They sprinted onto the mostly empty boardwalk, the wooden planks pounding under their feet. The amusement park rides were still and silent against the pink sky. The ocean crashed to their left. "What now?" Leo gasped, his side cramping. "They think we did it! Everyone thinks we did it! We have to think," Cassandra said, her eyes wild, scanning for threats. "The Duke!" "The one from the cathedral. This is his work. He took Eva and framed us. He knew we'd come. He knew the Celestials would track the energy signature he left behind. He used us," Kale snarled. "We played right into his hands." "So where would he take her?" Leo asked, desperation clawing at him. "He can't just perform a ritual to shove a prince of hell into my sister in the middle of a Starbucks. He needs a place of power. A hellmouth, you said." "There aren't any active hellmouths on this coast," Gabriel said, his voice crackling in their earpieces as he ran across rooftops, parallel to them. "The Celestials sealed the last one under the Hollywood sign in the 20s. Too many aspiring starlets making pacts." "Then where?" Leo insisted. Cassandra skidded to a halt, her eyes going wide with a terrible realization. "He doesn't need a natural one. He's making one." She looked at Leo, her face pale. "The ritual at the university. It wasn't just a scan. It was the first step. A needle." The focus, the shard, was the needle. What we just saw in your sister's apartment, the rose. That was the thread. Understanding dawned on Leo, cold and horrifying. "He's sewing. He's connecting the points, using the energy from the ritual and the abduction to create a temporary artificial hellmouth." "Exactly," Cassandra said. "And he'll need a third point to complete the circuit, a place of death or great suffering to ground the infernal energy and tear a hole between worlds." Her eyes scanned the horizon, the gears turning in her head. "Somewhere between San Francisco and Santa Cruz. Somewhere with a history." Leo's historian's mind, trained to see patterns in the past, made the connection instantly. The blood drained from his face. "Alcatraz," he whispered. "The infamous island prison. A place of despair, violence, and misery. A place where hope went to die. It was perfectly situated in the bay, between the 2 cities. "It's a triangle," Leo said, the pattern snapping into place with awful clarity. "The university archive, my sister's apartment, and Alcatraz. He's creating a massive infernal triangle, a circuit. He's going to use the island's dark history as a battery to rip a hole in the world and perform the ritual there." The sheer, terrifying brilliance of the plan left them speechless. It was audacious. It was horrific. "We have to get there," Leo said, his voice trembling with a new resolve. "We have to stop him." "It's a fortress," Kale said. "On an island, surrounded by water. They will be expecting us. It is the definition of a trap." "He has my sister," Leo said, turning to face them. The fear was still there, but it was now secondary to a burning, desperate anger. "I don't care if it's a trap. I'm going. Are you with me?" He was asking them to walk into certain death, to become fugitives from heaven and hell for a human girl they didn't know. Cassandra looked at him, at the determination etched on his face. She saw the blacksmith's son from Constantinople, refusing to be a victim. She nodded once, sharply. "We're with you." Gabriel's voice came through the comms, laced with its usual gallows humor. "Well, I've always wanted to break into prison. Let's go crash a demon's party." The decision was made. They were outcasts, hunted by both sides, walking into a death trap. But they were together, and they had one thing the Duke hadn't counted on. A seer who was done playing by anyone else's rules. Chapter 12. The Infernal Triangle. The plan was insane. It was a suicide run, and it was all they had. Getting to Alcatraz undetected was the first impossible task. The island sat in the middle of the bay, a cold, gray fortress surrounded by treacherous, icy waters. The first tourist ferries of the day wouldn't run for hours. "The water," Cale stated, looking at the churning dark waves. "It's the only way." "The water is freezing and crawling with celestial sentries," Gabriel argued, pacing the shoreline behind a rock outcropping where they were hiding. "They'll sense us the moment we dip a toe in." "Not if we're not the ones in the water," Leo said, an idea forming. He pointed to a cluster of fishing boats and private yachts moored at a nearby marina. "We need a boat, but we need a distraction." Cassandra followed his gaze, then looked up at the sky, which was lightening by the minute. "Gabriel, you're the distraction." Gabriel's eyes widened. "Oh, no, 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 no. You want me to play chicken with the angelic Air Force? I'm pretty, but I'm not that pretty." "You don't have to fight them," Cassandra said, a ruthless glint in her eye. "You just have to be loud. Be obvious. Head north. Make them think we're trying to flee the area. Draw as many of them away from the bay as you can." Gabriel looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw the logic. He sighed dramatically. "Fine. But if I get turned into a glowing stain on a hillside, I'm haunting all of you." He clapped Leo on the shoulder. "Don't get your sister killed, kid." With that, he turned and sprinted down the beach. A moment later, they heard the roar of a motorcycle engine. Where he'd gotten it, Leo had no idea, tearing off north along the coastal highway. Almost immediately, they felt it, a shift in the air, a focusing of celestial attention moving away from them, following the blatant, noisy signature Gabriel was projecting. "Now," Cassandra said. They moved like shadows into the marina. Cale made short work of the lock on a small, sturdy-looking speedboat. Within moments, they were on board, and Cale, with his intimate knowledge of mechanics, had the engine quietly purring. They cast off and motored slowly out of the marina, keeping the engine low to avoid drawing attention. The trip across the bay was tense and silent. The island of Alcatraz grew larger before them, its rigid silhouette a stark contrast to the soft morning light. It felt like approaching a tomb. As they drew closer, Leo's newly awakened sight began to scream. The air around the island was wrong. It wasn't just the historical weight of misery he'd expected to feel. This was active, malevolent, and fresh. A shimmering, barely visible dome of violet energy encased the island like a bubble. The air inside seemed to writhe and twist. "The triangle is active," Cassandra whispered, cutting the engine. They drifted the last 100 yards, the only sound the lap of water against the hull. "The points are connected! The university, the apartment, and this. He's inside, and he's almost finished." They moored the boat at a crumbling, deserted dock on the east side of the island, away from the main tourist entrance. The place was eerily silent. No gulls cried, no wind blew. The energy dome seemed to swallow all sound. They moved quickly through the abandoned prison grounds, past empty guard towers and cell blocks whose empty windows felt like watching eyes. Leo's sight was a compass of pain, leading him deeper into the complex, toward the source of the terrible energy. It was coming from the prison block itself. They slipped through a side door into the main cell house. The familiar, oppressive atmosphere of the prison was gone, replaced by something far worse. The air was thick and heavy, tasting of ozone and burnt copper. The long, narrow corridor of cells, famously known as Broadway, was illuminated not by the gray morning light, but by a pulsating violet glow that emanated from the far end. And from that end, they heard a voice. It was the Duke's voice, raised in that same guttural, ancient chant Leo had heard in the archives. But now it was stronger, layered with power and triumph. They crept closer, staying in the shadows of the cell doorways. The violet light grew brighter, the chanting louder. They reached the end of the corridor and peered into the open space that had once been the prison library. The scene inside would be burned into Leo's mind forever. The room had been cleared. On the concrete floor, the same complex, jagged symbol from the archive had been drawn, but this time it was carved deep into the stone and filled with a substance that smoked and glowed with a dark light. At each of the triangle's points, a pillar of violet fire roared toward the ceiling. In the center of the symbol, lying unconscious on a stone slab, was Eva. She was pale, but she seemed unharmed. For now. Standing over her was the Duke. He had discarded his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, and on his forearm, intricate black tattoos writhed and shifted like living things. He held the obsidian shard in one hand, and as he chanted, he used it to trace symbols in the air above Eva's body. Each symbol hung there, burning with dark energy before sinking into her chest. He was preparing her, conditioning the vessel, but he wasn't alone. Standing at the 3 points of the triangle, their hands raised, channeling the pillars of fire, were the 3 campus security guards from the archive. Rob and his colleagues. Their bodies were now fully distorted, their human forms stretched and broken to accommodate the infernal power flowing through them. Their eyes were pools of solid violet light. They were no longer possessed, they were consumed. Human batteries, burning out to power the Duke's ritual. "He's almost ready," Cassandra breathed, her hand tightening on her weapon. "He's not bringing Vasago through from hell. He's using the energy from the triangle to amplify his own power enough to force the prince's consciousness into her. He's the conduit." "We have to break the circle," Cale growled, hefting his pistol. "Take out the batteries." "It's too late for that," a new voice said softly behind them. They spun around. Standing there, leaning against a cell door as if he'd been waiting for them, was Gabriel. He was breathing heavily, his leather jacket was torn, and a nasty burn sizzled on his cheek. But he was alive. "The distraction worked a little too well," he said, his voice grim. "I led them on a merry chase. But Uriel's smart. He figured it out. He's coming, and he's bringing friends. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this island is swarming with very pissed-off angels." He nodded toward the ritual chamber. "And he's not the only one on his way." Leo followed his gaze. In the center of the room, above the unconscious form of his sister, the air was beginning to tear. Not a clean, celestial rip, but a ragged, bleeding wound in reality. Through it, Leo could see a vast, desolate landscape of ash and fire, and a towering, monstrous shadow was beginning to coalesce, reaching toward the opening. Prince Vasago was answering the call. They were out of time, out of options. The Duke's ritual was reaching its crescendo. The angels were coming to purge them all, and his sister was seconds away from being erased, her body and soul becoming the permanent home for a monster. Leo looked at the Nephilim, the outcasts, the half-breeds who had fought for him, who were now ready to die for a human girl they didn't know. He made a decision. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a Nephilim. He was a historian, a seer, and he knew something they didn't. He remembered the pottery shard in his pocket, the image of the falling angel. He remembered Malak's words. There are always 2 sides to a fall, the one who pushes and the one who jumps. He looked at the Duke, so focused on his masterpiece, so proud of his cunning. Leo understood. The Duke wasn't just a conduit. He was the sacrifice. "I know how to stop it," Leo said, his voice suddenly calm. All eyes turned to him. "But you're not going to like it!" Chapter 13, The Cost of a Fall. The chanting from the library reached a fever pitch. The pillars of violet fire flared, and the rip in reality above Eva widened with a sound like tearing silk. The shadowy form of Prince Vasago grew more solid, a colossal limb of smoke and nightmare beginning to push through into their world. The air grew thick and hot, smelling of sulfur and despair. "Whatever your plan is, now would be the time!" Gabriel yelled over the infernal din. "The ritual isn't powered by the guards," Leo shouted back, his eyes fixed on the Duke. "They're just the spark plugs. The main battery is him." He pointed at the Duke, who was now levitating slightly above Eva, his body rigid, his face a mask of ecstatic agony as vast power channeled through him. He's pouring everything he has into forcing the connection. He's the fuel. To complete the possession, to slam the door shut and lock Vasago inside Eva, he has to fully commit. He has to burn out his own essence. Cassandra's eyes widened in understanding. A total self-sacrifice. "He's not doing this for power. He's a fanatic. He's doing this for glory." "Exactly," Leo said, the plan forming with terrifying clarity. "But the ritual has a vulnerability. It's a perfect, closed system. If you disrupt it from the outside, it might collapse. But if you introduce a flaw from the inside..." "How?" Cale demanded, his weapon trained on the Duke. "A bullet won't stop that." "It's not about stopping the power," Leo said, his heart hammering. It's about redirecting it. The Duke is the funnel. Right now, he's aiming it all at Eva, but if his focus is shattered even for a second, that power has to go somewhere. It would backlash, Cassandra breathed, a horrified awe in her voice. It would feed back through him. It would obliterate him, Leo finished. And without his will to guide it, the connection to Visago would snap shut. But the energy has to go somewhere. It'll seek the next closest compatible vessel. All of them looked at Leo. No, Cassandra said immediately. Absolutely not. That's a death sentence. Your mind would be wiped clean. Your soul would be torn apart. Not if the protection on my bloodline holds, Leo argued, though he felt no confidence. It was a gamble with the worst odds imaginable. The celestial blessing that hid Eva, it's on me too. It might be enough to survive the surge, but we have to break the Duke's concentration. We have to get him to look at me. How do we do that? Gabriel asked. Leo looked at the Nephilim, his friends, the only family he had left in this nightmare. I need you to get me into that circle. It was madness. It was suicide. Before anyone could argue, a brilliant white light exploded at the far end of the cell block. The main doors blew off their hinges. Uriel stood framed in the doorway, its divine radiance a stark contrast to the infernal violet of the ritual. Behind it, a phalanx of celestial warriors raised their blazing swords. The abomination ends now! Uriel's voice boomed, shaking the very foundations of the prison. The Duke, distracted for a microsecond, flicked his gaze toward the interruption. The stream of power wavered. It was their only chance. Now! Leo screamed. The Nephilim moved as one. Kale roared, a sound of pure fury, and charged directly at the advancing celestial host, firing his pistol. It was a futile gesture, but it was a distraction. The Celestials focused on him, their blades coming up. Gabriel didn't charge. He turned, grabbed a rusted metal bench bolted to the floor, and with a grunt of effort, ripped it free. With a cry, he hurled it like a javelin not at the Duke, but at one of the consumed guards channeling the pillar of fire. The bench struck the guard in the chest. The connection faltered. The triangle of energy flickered violently. The Duke snarled, turning his attention to this new threat, his concentration broken for a critical second. That was all Cassandra needed. She didn't throw Leo, she launched him. With a strength born of desperation, she grabbed him by the jacket and hurled him through the air directly into the center of the ritual circle. Leo crashed onto the stone slab next to his unconscious sister. The moment he crossed the energy barrier, agony seized him. It felt like every nerve ending was on fire. The infernal power screamed through him, a tsunami of pure malice. The celestial blessing in his blood flared in response, a golden light fighting a desperate rearguard action against the violet dark. The Duke's head snapped around. His violet eyes, wide with shock and rage, locked onto Leo. You! He bellowed. And in that moment, his focus was entirely on the seer who had ruined his masterpiece. The flawless system had a flaw. The vast, unimaginable power the Duke was channeling, the energy meant to force a prince of hell into a single vessel, suddenly had a new, unexpected, and violently incompatible target. Leo. The energy backlash was instantaneous and catastrophic. The Duke's eyes went wide with shock, then utter horror as the power he commanded turned on him. He screamed, a sound that was not human, not demonic, but the raw sound of a soul being unmade. The violet energy flowing into Eva reversed course, sucking back into the Duke, overloading him. His body began to glow, then blister, then dissolve into ash from the inside out. In less than a second, he was gone, vaporized by his own stolen power. With its conductor destroyed, the ritual collapsed. The pillars of fire winked out. The 3 consumed guards collapsed into piles of smoldering ash. The rip in reality above Eva shuddered. The monstrous limb of Prince Visago, already halfway through, thrashed in fury. A psychic scream of pure, world-ending rage echoed through every mind on the island. Then, with a sound like a universe sighing, the tear snapped shut. The connection was severed. But the energy didn't just disappear. The colossal surge, with nowhere to go, recoiled like a snapped wire. It hit Leo. The world exploded into white-hot pain. He felt his mind fracturing, his senses overloading. He saw Constantinople burn. He saw a golden-eyed monk. He saw a beautiful woman with shadow wings. He saw Eva laughing on a beach. He saw the falling angel on the pottery shard. The celestial blessing in his blood fought a war against the infernal tsunami, a battle fought in every cell of his body. He was the battleground. He felt something break. And then, nothing. Silence. The violet light was gone. The library was dark, lit only by the cold gray dawn filtering through the windows and the blinding white light of the celestial host. Leo lay on the cold stone next to his sister. He was alive. He was whole. But as he opened his eyes and looked up at the concerned faces of Cassandra, Gabriel, and a bleeding but standing Kale, he knew something was wrong. He could see them. He could hear Uriel's footsteps approaching. He could feel the cold stone beneath him, but he couldn't feel them. The world was flat, muted. The deep, resonant hum of existence that he had only just begun to perceive with his sight was gone. The lingering echo of the divine and the infernal had vanished. The connection was severed there, too. Uriel stood over them, its blazing sword lowered. It looked from the ashes of the Duke to the unconscious but unharmed Eva to Leo. Its expression was unreadable. The seer, it said, its voice no longer filled with wrath, but with a strange, almost clinical tone. You sacrificed your gift, prosody. You burned out your own sight to contain the backlash and save the vessel. Leo tried to speak, but his voice was a rasp. He could only nod. He had done it. He had saved Eva, but the cost was the very thing that had made him special, the thing that had made him a target, the thing that had let him see the true world. He was just Leo Valerian again. Just a man. And as he looked at the Archangel, he had no idea if that would be enough to save them. Chapter 14. The New Compact. The silence in the aftermath was heavier than the earlier chaos. The only sounds were the drip of water somewhere in the prison and Eva's soft, steady breathing. She was alive, unharmed, sleeping as if the nightmare had never happened. Uriel looked down at them, its celestial light dimmed to a bearable glow. The fury was gone from its face, replaced by a deep, unnerving contemplation. It sheathed its sword of fire. The gesture was not one of peace, but of a temporary armistice. "The vessel is secure! The infernal threat is neutralized!" it stated, its voice echoing in the hollow space. Its gaze swept over the Nephilim, lingering on their wounds, their defiant stances, and finally settled on Leo. By unexpected hands. It took a step closer, and the Nephilim tensed, moving instinctively to shield Leo and Eva. "Stand down," Uriel said, not with a command, but with a tone of resignation. "The seer is no longer a threat. His light is extinguished. The corruption has been burned away at great cost." Leo slowly, painfully got to his feet. The world felt dull, two-dimensional. He could no longer sense the Celestial's immense power, only see its brilliant form. He felt hollowed out, scraped clean. But he met Uriel's gaze without flinching. "It wasn't corruption," Leo said, his voice raw but steady. "It was a different way of seeing, and I used it to stop your war." Uriel was silent for a long moment. "You broke a cycle that has endured for millennia. A Duke of Hell is destroyed. A prince is thwarted. The intended vessel is saved." It seemed almost puzzled. "You acted with self-sacrifice, a virtue." "We all did," Cassandra said, stepping forward. Her clothes were torn, her face smudged with soot, but she stood with an authority that demanded attention. "The compact is in ruins, Uriel. Your people were ready to execute innocence based on planted evidence. Ours," she gestured to the Nephilim, "fought to protect a human life at the risk of our own. The old rules don't work." Uriel's luminous eyes studied her. "What are you proposing, daughter of the fallen?" "A new compact," Leo said, the idea forming as he spoke. He wasn't a seer anymore, but he was still a historian. He understood patterns, treaties, the end of wars. Not between heaven and hell, but between you. He looked at Uriel and us. He gestured to the Nephilim and to himself. "The ones who actually walk this earth. The ones who care about its fate." He took a shaky breath. "You stay in your heaven. They stay in their hell. You fight your proxy war through whispers and inspiration, like you always have. But the direct interventions, the open warfare, the possession of human souls, that ends. And we," he said, meaning the Nephilim, "will be the enforcers. We will be the barrier. We will stop any infernal or celestial from breaking the rules. We will protect humanity from both of you." The audacity of the proposal hung in the air. A human, a handful of half-breeds, dictating terms to an archangel. Uriel did not laugh. It did not rage. It looked at the ashes of the Duke. It looked at the sleeping saved girl. It looked at Leo, who had sacrificed his power for her. "The balance of power has shifted," Uriel said, not to them, but to itself. The old ways failed. A new strategy is required. It focused on Cassandra. The Nephilim would be wardens? We would be guardians, Cassandra corrected, her chin held high, of the world you all claim to care about but are so willing to burn down. A long, tense minute passed. Then Uriel gave a single, slow nod. The celestial host will withdraw. We will consider this proposal. The girl's memory will be scoured of this event. She will remember nothing but a bad dream. It fixed Leo with a final, piercing look. The war is not over, Leo Valerian. It is merely adjourned. You have bought a peace. It is up to you to prove it can hold. Without another word, Uriel turned. The celestial warriors behind it fell into formation, and then, in a flash of light that left after images dancing in front of their eyes, they were gone. The prison was silent. The early morning sun, real and warm, streamed through the windows. It was over. 1 week later. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Leo sat on the deck of a rented beach house in Santa Cruz, a blanket around his shoulders, watching the waves. Eva was inside, laughing on the phone with a friend from school, her voice full of its normal, vibrant life. She remembered nothing. To her, it had been a weird case of food poisoning that had left her exhausted for a day. The door to the deck slid open. Cassandra stepped out, holding 2 bottles of beer. She handed one to Leo and sat down in the chair next to him. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Leo took a long swallow of beer. "I feel normal," he said, and it was the strangest feeling in the world. "I can't see the patterns in the air anymore. I can't feel the echoes. It's quiet." "Do you miss it?" He thought about it. "Sometimes, but mostly, I'm relieved. I can finally finish my dissertation." He offered her a weak smile. Cassandra smiled back, a real, genuine smile that reached her golden eyes. "Kale's wrist is healing. Gabriel is already bored and talking about opening a detective agency, Nephilim for hire, or something equally stupid." Leo laughed. It felt good. "What about you?" Her smile faded. "We have a job to do. Uriel's truce is fragile. There will be infernals who don't like the new rules. There will be celestials who think we've overstepped. We have to be ready." She looked at him. "We could use a historian, someone who understands the long game, someone who remembers the cost." Leo looked out at the ocean, at the vast, unknowable deep. He thought about the blacksmith's son in Constantinople, who had witnessed the start of a war. He was just a man now. No special sight, no divine power. But he had something more valuable. He had a choice. He had family to protect. He had friends who were more than friends. He had a world worth fighting for, not from a distance, but right in the messy, complicated middle of it. He wasn't a prize. He wasn't a weapon. He was a guardian. He turned to Cassandra and nodded. "I'm in." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky. The war between heaven and hell was ancient, and it was far from over. But for now, in the quiet calm of the evening, there was peace, and it was theirs to defend. The end.
Author's note. All essences. Thank you for embarking on this journey through the shadows of San Francisco and the echoes of Constantinople. Writing this story, crafting Leo's transformation from a curious student into a reluctant guardian, and weaving the fates of Cassandra, Kale, and Gabriel with his own, has been a thrilling exploration of choice, sacrifice, and the blurred lines between absolute good and evil. This narrative was built on a foundation of contrasts. The ancient conflict against a modern backdrop, the divine versus the infernal, and the personal stakes of a global war. The goal was always to move quickly, to keep the pages turning, while ensuring the characters felt real enough to root for, even when faced with impossible decisions. Leo's loss of his sight at the climax felt like the most honest conclusion to his arc. True heroism often lies not in gaining power, but in what one is willing to give up for the greater good. His journey is a reminder that you don't need to be a chosen one to make a choice that changes the world. While this particular tale concludes here, the world of wardens and the fragile new compact certainly leaves room for more stories in the future. The war is far from over, I hope you enjoyed the ride. Sincerely, the author.
Author's note. Thank you for embarking on this journey through the shadows of San Francisco and the echoes of Constantinople. Writing this story, crafting Leo's transformation from a curious student into a reluctant guardian, and weaving the fates of Cassandra, Cale, and Gabriel with his own, has been a thrilling exploration of choice, sacrifice, and the blurred lines between absolute good and evil. This narrative was built on a foundation of contrasts: the ancient conflict against a modern backdrop, the divine versus the infernal, and the personal stakes of a global war. The goal was always to move quickly, to keep the pages turning, while ensuring the characters felt real enough to root for, even when faced with impossible decisions. Leo's loss of his sight at the climax felt like the most honest conclusion to his arc. True heroism often lies not in gaining power, but in what one is willing to give up for the greater good. His journey is a reminder that you don't need to be a chosen one to make a choice that changes the world. While this particular tale concludes here, the world of Wardens and the fragile new compact certainly leaves room for more stories in the future. The war is far from over. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Sincerely, the author.